With X-Men 97 already a hit, and Deadpool and Wolverine set to bring the X-Men back to the big screen, after Doctor Strange 2 and the Marvels already got the ball rolling, it's clear that all eyes are on the mutants at the MCU. But with Deadpool and Wolverine, two of the most popular X-Men around, taking center stage once again, it feels like a good time to remind everyone of my favorite member of the X-Men, Kurt Wagner.
No, mein Freund. Nein!
Now listen, I adore this tiefling-coded mutant. He is a walking contradiction that embodies the heart of the X-Men, I feel. His mutation makes him an outcast in mainstream society in a way that no other mutant is. He looks, frankly, demonic, yet he's a devoted Catholic. He looks fearsome, yet loves humanity, especially his fellow X-Men, a found family who replaces the family he loses early in his life.
Outside of the circus, most people were afraid of me, but I didn't hate them. I pitied them, because most people will never know anything beyond what they see with their own two eyes.
His mutant abilities of teleportation make him, in many ways, one of the least dangerous of the core X-Men team, yet he's feared above all others due to his appearance. Depending on which decade of the X-Men you're reading, he's either the child of a demon, a mutant who looks like a demon, or the child of two moms who figured out a way to make it work.
I adopted Rogue when she was a young child, but before that I bore 2 children. One of them was you.
Though Mystique's always involved in this somewhere, except only kind of in the live-action films. In those, Nightcrawler is just sort of there.
Why not stay in disguise all the time? Look like everyone else.
Because we shouldn't have to.
Actually, Nightcrawler is consistently always there in adaptations. He's seldom a central player, even in the comics, but he's usually part of the team. And this is both a good and bad thing, because on one hand, Nightcrawler works so well as a supporting cast member. He's always given that moment to shine, where he has to bring someone out of a bind, or come in with the important statement that brings everyone together.
Sometimes anger can help you survive.
So can faith.
I think just about everyone agrees in the X-Men movies that his infiltration of the White House is one of the best scenes in the series. Not just X2, but the whole movie series. And in X-Men 97, him tri-wielding swords, fighting Prime Sentinels, peak. Absolute peak moment. But would he necessarily work as the main character? I don't know if he would work as a main character in the films or cartoons, but he works as a main character. But I feel often Nightcrawler isn't simply a supporting character. Think about it for a second. You might watch X-Men 97 and think, oh, he's always been there. That he's always been an intrinsic player in the X-Men animated series, but that's not really the case.
Kurt only shows up in 2 episodes of this show, and it's kind of odd considering he was one of the most popular X-Men characters, even though he wasn't in the main X-Men books at the time. He is a monk who dresses like that.
Despite being teased as a main player in the unused pilot, Pride of the X-Men, Nightcrawler only appeared in 2 episodes of Season 4 of the original 90s animated series. In Wolverine and the X-Men, he's not a big player, and since that show ended after 1 season, that really doesn't count for anything. The only animated series that incorporated Nightcrawler as a main player from beginning to end was X-Men Evolution.
That was tight! I give it 2 thumbs up!
And the show was all the better for it as a result, using him to demonstrate a core theme. The divide between identifying as a marginalized person and the desire to blend in to normal society. And we first see Kurt eager to use the hologram technology to hide his blue skin and tail. But over time, we see him gradually come out of the closet, so to speak, as a mutant. Once he publicly identifies as a mutant, however, it becomes impossible for him to hide who he is. It's a fascinating little arc and showcases all of the traits of Nightcrawler that I think make him such a great character. But we'll get into that later.
Happy? How can I be happy when I look like this? I scare people.
But it's impossible to talk about this without talking about the films as well. Clearly, Nightcrawler appears in 4 of the X-Men movies, X2, X-Men Apocalypse, Deadpool 2 in a blink and you miss it gag, and Dark Phoenix. Of all these appearances, only one, X2, uses Nightcrawler in a way that's remotely acceptable to this great character. X2 is widely seen as the best of the X-Men movies made, period. And I credit a lot of that to do with Nightcrawler, as played by Alan Cumming. While the other films treat Nightcrawler as basically just a glorified cameo, X2 actually dives into the elements that make Nightcrawler distinct. The contrast between his appearance and his personality, his devotion to his faith, his sense of found family versus his actual family. Wait, actually no, never mind. That's not revealed in any of the films, is it? We never confirm that Mystique is Nightcrawler's mother in any of the films, despite Mystique appearing in almost every time he shows up. His jovial attitude, okay, that's actually not there either, because Nightcrawler is very dour in the X-Men films, even in X2. And with X2 it makes sense because he's accused for attacking the president. He has reason to be concerned with everything. So he's a little dour there. But otherwise, the core elements of Nightcrawler are present. I think a big reason why Nightcrawler struggled in the original X-Men trilogy, at least, is because he didn't appear in X3.
I feel like this was meant to be set up for that third X-Men movie that they never ended up making. Like, Kurt and Logan were going to learn to be friends in that third X-Men movie that didn't... Yep. Too bad they never made that third X-Men movie, huh?
Nightcrawler has no role in the third X-Men film, and there's no explanation in universe as to why. The reality is the script didn't include a lot of him, and Alan Cumming, rather than spend like 9 hours in the makeup chair, decided, you know what, I'll opt out of this time. Now, granted, the trade-off is we got more of Kelsey Grammer's Beast, who is another character who is iconic in these films, and frankly undermined by his appearance in the prequel X-Men movies.
Who's the furball?
Hank McCoy, Secretary of Mutant Affairs.
Right, the secretary.
Who are you?
I'm Hank. Hank McCoy. I look after the house now.
You're Beast? Look at you. I guess you're a late bloomer.
One of the few weak links, I think, of those films. But Nightcrawler's presence in X2 adds optimism in an otherwise very bleak movie. He would like to blend into the society that hates him, but he also has empathy for the blindly ignorant people who hate him based on just how he's born. His interactions with Storm really, and again, Storm is another character who's downgraded in these films, these interactions really help build on the themes of the movie. And in fact, both Storm and Nightcrawler are essential to saving Professor X. Both help the other. Both use their abilities to benefit the mission.
I told you, if I can't see where I'm going,
I have faith in you.
And both of their moralities and outlooks helps encourage the other in the darkest of moments in this film.
Sometimes anger can help you survive.
so can faith.
X2 is a great movie, by the way. Every single mutant, save for Cyclops, has a time to shine, and that's fantastic. But what do the X-Men films lose by dropping Kurt? Well, a lot, frankly. For one, without Kurt, mutants become increasingly human. And by that, I don't mean that they're humanized. There's very little reason to differentiate mutants from ordinary people without someone who's more overtly, visibly mutated. Because the logic becomes, why not just hide your powers all the time and blend in if you look the same like everyone else? Even the other mutants who are visibly different, like Mystique, like Beast even, have the ability to blend in, but Nightcrawler can't do that.
It behooves me to tell you that even if we save the world tomorrow, and mutants are accepted into society, my feet in your natural blue form will never be deemed beautiful.
I mean, let's be honest. In the alternate timeline branching from Days of Future Past, Beast finishes his arc where he's able to transform into his bestial form or blend in like everyone else. And the conclusion he comes to is, yeah, actually, I'll just hide my mutation and look like everyone else. But Nightcrawler has a different epiphany in the comics, in adaptations, that by hiding yourself, you only isolate yourself from those who matter, the true found family who love you unconditionally.
I'm normal. Of course you're normal, Kurt. But not because of that machine.
Normal is what you truly are.
Never think otherwise.
By being yourself, you are being honest with who you are to those around you, and in turn, able to freely express yourself in a way that is powerful and profound. And that's a great message that is not shown in the X-Men movies, where he just shows up, looks different, and just kind of exists with everyone else.
How fast are you?
How fast?
How far can you cover?
As far as I can see, or if I've been there before.
Come with me, Crawler.
The only time we see him ever struggle with this is again in X-Men 2. Also, the X-Men become sort of similar without Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler in the comics is distinctly Catholic, and his Catholicism informs his interactions with those around him. But unlike, say, a lot of Catholics in fiction who are judgy, fanatical, or hiding deep, dark secrets of a destructive nature, Nightcrawler sees his religion as validating. God created him like this, and God loves all his children. Therefore, God loves mutants. With all he encounters along the way, his faith in God's love pulls him through. Yes, he believes that these are tests from God, his struggles, but he believes that he will ultimately succeed, and this belief is ultimately contrasted with his demonic appearance and, for a time, demonic ancestry. Now, the films introduce Azazel as a mutant, and the implication there is that he is Nightcrawler's father based purely on how similar they look. And of course, in the comics, Mystique is Nightcrawler's mother, no matter what retcons show up.
Stop this! She is our mother. She gave you life. She is a mutant!
But the films never make that explicit. In fact, Mystique and Nightcrawler have interactions that tease at the ancestry, but never outright state it. And I think that's because they don't want to have Katniss Everdeen be a bad mom who dumps her kids and runs. I don't know.
Always good to see your face, even if it's not yours.
Like, make Mystique a villain, alright? She's not Katniss Everdeen.
Don't call me that.
No matter how much you pretend to be someone else, Caliban knows who you are.
Anyway, Nightcrawler. Right. Nightcrawler offers diversity of thought that is essential to the X-Men. Something we see to great effect in X2 and not really anywhere else. At no point outside of X-Men 2 does he bring up his Catholic faith in a way that is impactful on the narrative or the other characters. We see it in the 90s show, we see it in X-Men 97, we see it in everything else but the films, again, outside of X2. This push of the ideological nature helps elevate the X-Men in a way that's interesting and distinct, challenging their core beliefs in a way that doesn't necessarily show that everyone sees all these matters from one singular lens. Unfortunately, by sidelining him, you sideline this ideological difference, which homogenizes the X-Men on a intellectual, emotional level. But what about the comics? What roles has Nightcrawler served in the past? Can he be the center of a main story, or does he only work as a supporting character? And what can the MCU learn now that they have the chance to reintegrate Nightcrawler into the upcoming X-Men team? Let's analyze that. When reviewing the major X-Men storylines featuring Nightcrawler, ignoring of course his initial appearance in Giant Size X-Men #1, we see several moments that define both Kurt's heroism and his sense of integrity. A lot of this can be owed to Chris Claremont's writing. Take Uncanny X-Men #4, for example, where we take a look into Kurt's past. We see him reviled in his home village and learn, prior to being taken in by Professor X, Kurt was being held accountable for a series of murders. Turns out the killer is Kurt's adopted brother. And Kurt does have to kill his brother to stop these killings. But to spare his family from being held accountable, he takes accountability for the crime and runs away. He, the outsider, is responsible, not those from in the village. And that's to save those he cares about.
Expanding on the introduction of the image inducer and focusing on how Nightcrawler saw himself in relation to the rest of the world, a conversation between the two revealed that despite being a man of normal religious means, Kurt's conviction only went so far, and that he considered himself somewhat of a mistake by God, and even resented his own existence. Now this is supremely important, and the reason why is that for those of you who saw the film X-Men First Class, Magneto's speech to Mystique, where he referenced her desire to be accepted by humanity, despite being unable to accept herself, was quite literally a page out of this story. In the eyes of Wolverine, the image inducer was a useful tool which could be used by Nightcrawler if he needed it, but it should not serve as a crutch to replace his feelings of self-doubt and a lack of worthiness. Now following this comic and going forward into the rest of Claremont's run, Kurt's character was evolved yet again to reflect a bolstered self-worth and contributing member of the team, but also focused heavily on his faith.
Nightcrawler has been a part of multiple teams over the years, including Excalibur and his own Endmen, which is a whole other discussion. Now, his death in the battle for the Atom is followed by a story of his resurrection. Unlike a lot of resurrections, however, it results in him being pushed against his very faith. So, in the comics, he dies to protect Hope Summers.
And finally, because it was his turn, I guess, Nightcrawler died during one of those belabored multi-issue series-spanning event crossovers that I hate. There is a living MacGuffin named Hope, and he dies saving her in a way that I can't help but think, he could have figured out something a little bit less, martyry, but okay.
He is sent to heaven, because of course he is. And while there, he is tested. To return to life, Kurt has to sacrifice something profound to him. Heaven.
Nightcrawler's only down for about 2 years before they bring him back. He's in heaven, and who shows back up but that motherfucker Azazel. And you know what? If we must have a character as ridiculous as Azazel, he may as well be dressed like a pirate and sailing a pirate ship around the afterlife and commanding an army of demons in his quest to take over heaven while dressed like a pirate.
Yes, he goes off to be a swashbuckler and with swords, yes, but he loses something important. Nightcrawler is resurrected when his father, quote-unquote, Azazel, launches an invasion on heaven. Now, this invasion is only possible due to Azazel's connection to Nightcrawler's soul, being his father, quote-unquote, at the time. And by virtue of Nightcrawler being in heaven, Azazel can now go to heaven using Nightcrawler. That means if Nightcrawler is in heaven, Azazel can always get in there to launch his attack. So to protect heaven, Kurt teleports out of there with his father. He can never return to his heavenly paradise. To protect his faith, he can never enjoy its benefits. And this is a major component of his character. This weighs heavily on him, and this has stuck. At no point in Kurt's multiple other deaths has he returned to heaven. And that's heartbreaking. This sacrifice is a lot. It's the same as when he took the blame for his adopted brother's crimes, only taken to an extreme. Because, yeah, he dies again later, and he can't return to his paradise. The paradise he deserves more than just about any other soul out there. The one that he has spent his whole life longing for. But he gets to go on swashbuckling adventures, so there's a trade-off. And during the Krakoa arc, death becomes a rotating door anyway. So what does it matter? His faith. Death may have no material obstacle during the Krakoa arc, but his faith in God is valuable, and his separation from God is a powerful element. Also, Kurt becomes Spider-Man at one point, which, look, that's worth talking about. I also want to bring up the Chuck Austen run on X-Men for a bit, because Austen introduces a few elements to play with Nightcrawler's Catholic faith, and I don't think they work, but I think they don't work in ways that are interesting and worth discussing. I feel like if we discuss how characters don't work in some ways, it actually elevates how they do work, and etc. You know what I'm trying to say. Now, under Austen, Nightcrawler becomes a priest who very rapidly becomes a candidate for the Pope of the Catholic Church, and that's not how the papacy works, but sure, whatever.
Turns out that Kurt never was ordained as a priest. Someone telepathically implanted it in his mind. Man, the trust issues people must have in this universe. Anyway, it's stupid, but the long and short is that there was this big conspiracy that wanted Kurt to eventually become the Pope, and then they were going to use communion wafers to make all the Catholics in the world explode, and people would be like, rapture, and then it would be revealed that Kurt looks the way he does, and then people were going to think he was the Antichrist, and this was all set in motion because there was a nun who got raped by a priest and wanted to murder all of the Catholics. You see why people didn't care much for this stretch?
And Austen, the rapture isn't a Catholic concept. Like you know that, right? The Catholics don't believe in the rapture. That's a Protestant idea. That was made by American evangelists back in the 19th century. The Catholic Church doesn't believe in the rapture. In fact, the Catholic Church doesn't believe in the Antichrist either, for that matter. Some Catholics do, but the church doctrine sees the Book of Revelation as an allegorical text for the persecutions of Christians during the Roman Empire. It has nothing to do with anything about the end of days. I mean, unless you've just seen The Omen a lot and think that's what the Catholic Church actually believes. The reality is this. If you're going to write about Nightcrawler and his faith, you need to understand how Catholicism informs Nightcrawler's character, and to know that, you need to know how the Catholic Church functions as an organization, beyond the hiding pedophiles. Nightcrawler's Catholic faith gives him hope for the human soul, not just his own but others, and this results in him acting in ways that are self-sacrificing for the good of others, and anchors him to a code of morality, of love and acceptance, rather than fear. And I think contrasting him with characters like Reverend Stryker is especially poignant. Now, Stryker, again, in the films, he's a general or military guy. In the comics, he is a reverend. Stryker sees mutants as an abomination to be destroyed based on his religious doctrine, and he uses his platform to motivate others to attack mutants in the name of God. He uses religious doctrine, as many others have in the past, to argue that some people are less deserving of God's love, that they reject the nature of God's creation. In turn, this makes them abhorrent. What makes Nightcrawler so wonderful is he is there to counter this. Religion in fiction is often used as shorthanded for destructive fanaticism, and it's very easy to believe that all religious people are bigots if you buy into this without questioning it. Of course, it's simply not true. Religious doctrine is its own widespread with a whole spectrum of belief in everything. If your primary experiences with religion are bad, by that nature, it's easy to believe that all religious people are buying into some bigoted core belief, but that is simply not the case. Religion has inspired a lot of wide ranges of thought, oftentimes self-critical thought. Nightcrawler represents a criticism of the harmful, toxic ways religion can be used to justify bigotry. And I think that's necessary, a good counterbalance, because we know that fanaticism and cruelty exists and is justified by the Bible so often, or at least the Bible is used to justify acts of cruelty. Nightcrawler offers a major counterpoint. Him and Daredevil, I think, do a lot of legwork to show that Catholics can be very good people and aren't just the worst of the religious order that we see all the time presented in media. But in Austen's run, Catholicism is used as a weapon to spread bigotry. This goes against Nightcrawler's core role as a Catholic. And this also ties in with how Austen introduces Azazel, who at first is a demon. Yes, he's later retconned to be a mutant who resembles a demon, and later on, retconned to not even be Nightcrawler's father, but Austen saw this as a way to make Nightcrawler's demonic appearance not simply just an aesthetic thing, but a literal tie to hell itself. And in this way, he almost becomes Marvel's equivalent of Hellboy, an anti-Antichrist. Knowing this also puts into perspective his viewpoints on Nightcrawler becoming the Pope, but I digress. Faith here is used as something terrifying and dangerous rather than constructive, which I feel misses the point of Nightcrawler. And frankly, I much prefer the current origin, where Mystique and Destiny figure out a way to conceive a child together, using Mystique's shape-shifting abilities. Azazel might have thought he was the father, but he is tragically mistaken now. This does put into question how Azazel launched an invasion of heaven through Nightcrawler's eternal soul, but, details, whatever. This is better. The reason I love this origin so much is it frames Nightcrawler's birth less as an abomination and more as a miracle. Going back to Stryker for a second, it's no secret that modern religion has been used as an element against LGBTQA people. It's a weapon that bigots use. But Nightcrawler doesn't have a bigoted bone in his body, and his birth is, quite frankly, not only endorsement of mutant kind, but also of actual marginalized people who are attacked by religious doctrine today. Nightcrawler is no less faithful and doesn't see any contradiction between the nature of his birth and his religion. It simply is. He believes that God made everyone this way, and therefore God created all different types of diverse people. The marginalized are not abhorrent, they are part of the design. And to Nightcrawler, that's validating. And it's a good way of looking at it through a positive religious lens. Even if you are not religious, you can still see that as positive. There is no guilt, there is no shame, it is simply the way people were meant to be. And that's a beautiful thing, that acceptance. And Nightcrawler embodies that very well. If anything, being conceived without a father is actually more religiously relevant. Sure, it's no virgin birth. I mean, no one's going to call Mystique a virgin, but it's hard not to draw some parallels between the source of Christianity itself and Nightcrawler's conception. Though, granted, you have to squint and turn your head a little bit. It's not a perfect one-to-one example, but you can make an argument can be made. I mean, more of an argument can be made for Nightcrawler being a Christ metaphor than Superman, who is way more of a Moses metaphor, by the way, put in a basket with swaddling clothes, sent away from a dying world of sorts, has 1 foot in one world, 1 foot in the other. It's a Moses metaphor. But again, we'll talk about Superman of the night. Now, Catholics don't believe in the rapture, but they do believe in the harrowing of hell. That Jesus, shortly after his death, but before his resurrection, went to hell to break free the souls of the condemned and bring them to heaven. It's not hard to read Nightcrawler saving heaven from Azazel as his own sort of inverted harrowing. To protect heaven from hell, Nightcrawler had to return to life. It's poetic and tragic. Taking Nightcrawler's Christ metaphor further, with Krakoa, he helps usher in a new world with his death and resurrection, since he's one of the first mutants to pass on and be resurrected on Krakoa. Granted, it's hard to say that's a new paradise on Earth, but you can make an argument that it sort of is. A moment of salvation for mutant kind. A Masonic figure of sorts, though not a solo effort. But again, that's a bit of a stretch, I realize, and I'm not going to act like I have a hard list of reasons why I believe that. It's just worth considering. So where does that leave us? The future has the potential to make Nightcrawler an instrumental part of the MCU, and not simply as a new Spider-Man. The post-Krakoa era is already upon us, which opens the door for tons of new ideas for Nightcrawler. New writers come in and do their own spin on this iconic figure. But in regards to the films, it's hard to say. Azazel is in Deadpool and Wolverine, but there's no reason to expect Nightcrawler at this time. Further, there's no reason to believe, even if he does show up, that he'll play a major role in any of these films. He hasn't played a major role in any of the prior films, X2 notwithstanding. But if he does, it would be to the new X-Men team's net benefit. They need someone of faith on their side. We already saw how Daredevil's Catholic faith can be an additive element to a superhero story, especially positive Catholic representation where they do not embody the bigotries we see so often associated with religious ideology. Nightcrawler is Catholic, but that Catholicism is self-reflected, not outwardly judgmental. And he can also wield 3 swords at the same time while being a swashbuckling Spider-Man pirate. All of that is possible with Nightcrawler, and I fail to see how no one else is excited about that possibility. Also, and this is a key element that I think is important, give Nightcrawler a love interest this time. Seriously.
He is sometimes romantically paired with the occasional fellow X-Man, but the most consistent love interest is his adopted sister, Amanda Sefton.
The only adaptation so far brave enough to give Nightcrawler any love life is X-Men Evolution, and that shows all the stronger for it.
Amanda Sefton is here too, and thank God she is not his adoptive sister this time, so it's way less weird, although it is still kind of weird.
When you suddenly changed into something else and then disappeared, I couldn't believe it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Your tail, your digigrade hind legs.
All I knew was I just had to get to know you.
She sees his true self and thinks hot and not like, what?
Nightcrawler uses his disguise to make himself appear normal, quote unquote, and finds a girlfriend. This relationship is impacted when Nightcrawler finally stops hiding and is openly a mutant. And that's a beautiful idea with a lot of potential. In the MCU, I really think what they should do is give Nightcrawler a girlfriend who knows him when he's disguised as a human, and eventually he has to come out in some way as a mutant. He has to deactivate the disguise and show himself for what he is with his true form. And it would be beautiful if, when he does that, he is accepted unconditionally by that person he is with. It would be a very beautiful way to show the real world implications of coming out of sorts. Also, listen, this is the other thing too. A little more selfish, but a lot of people might just like Nightcrawler in his mutant form. I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking. I mean, listen, tieflings have been making a comeback lately. I mean, Nightcrawler doesn't have the horns or anything, but he has the tail. He has the skin. I mean, listen. There's no reason to believe that everyone would be so hesitant to maybe go on a ride with Nightcrawler. I'm just saying. I'm not saying I think that. I'm just saying, hypothetically speaking, someone might, Also, important question. Where do you guys stand on the tiefling discussion involving tail size? Do you think tiefling should have more prehensile, thin tails, or like the big, thick tails? I've been getting into discussions with D&D people about that, and it's interesting the way different people think of it. I think Nightcrawler works better with that little narrow tail because he can, tri-wield swords, but I digress. In any event, Nightcrawler being a new member of the X-Men is instrumental and should happen, I think, in the films. And if they don't do that, it's going to be a massive waste of everyone's time. We need more Nightcrawler. I think what's important with the new wave of MCU X-Men films is that they embrace the diversity of characters that they have available to them. We know Wolverine's popular. Wolverine's already getting his own movie with Deadpool. Give someone else a shot. Give Scott a chance. Give Jean Grey a chance. Give Rogue a chance. Give Kitty Pryde a chance. Kitty Pryde has been possibly even more poorly treated in the X films than Nightcrawler, I would argue. But I digress. Point is, the X-Men are popular not because of one singular character. They're popular because of the whole group. And with this new chance to revive the X-Men, there is a great opportunity to reintroduce audiences to all of the X-Men. Not just Wolverine, not just Professor X, not just Magneto, not just Beast, but all of them. And if they give Nightcrawler a chance, that would be all the better. Also, again, Kitty Pryde, Nightcrawler, give Rogue her abilities. Hell, you even have Captain Marvel. Have Rogue steal Captain Marvel's powers, and there you go. You got that storyline in the bag. There's so much possibility for these X-Men films. It would be terrible to just see them repeat the same cycles we've seen already in a film series that is, unfortunately, not all that consistent. I would say the Venom trilogy is more consistent than the X-Men films under Fox. Now, I'm not saying that for any reason necessarily. I'm not bringing up Venom in particular because I'm going to be talking about him next week or anything. But, if I were talking about Venom next week, it would be really bad because he's not really tied in with the events going on here. But I need an excuse to talk about Venom because I've been talking about that since my Spider-Man Batman video. I think I have an idea. I think I make it work somehow. I'm going to channel my inner Sarah Zed here with this teacup right here.